and to the international participants. I hope everybody's doing well. I know it's a very different times that we're living in today, as if we're kind of locked into our own homes. I don't know how things are in Pakistan or in other parts of the world, but in Canada, I mean, they're just locking it down again. The summer was good. We were allowed to go out and just do different activities, but now they're asking us not to do it anymore. There's a really big surge. So I would really start by saying a response or giving a responsible message that please take care of yourself and the ones around you, and please act responsibly. This is no joke. I know a few people around me who got tested just yesterday, so it's really something that's out there. So be careful. All right, so now I would just begin by giving you a very brief introduction about myself and the place where I work, just to give you an idea about what kind of an ecosystem we have here. As you know, my name is Umair. I've been living in Canada for almost 10 years, in fact, over 10 years now. And I did my undergrad in Pakistan. So I'm from Lahore. So I did my undergrad and then I worked for a startup for almost a year. And that startup was a spin off of one of the professors who was working at LUMS. So I came to Canada in 2010 to pursue my master's degree. And that was a research master's degree, and that was in the domain of management of technology. My supervisor, who hired me at the University of Waterloo, had a lot of funding from Research in Motion, or at that time, we used to call it RIM. Now it's called BlackBerry. So BlackBerry is a company which was started by somebody at the University of Waterloo, and it was an alumni, and they had a really good partnership with the university throughout. So I did my master's, and then I pursued my PhD in the domain of management of technological innovation, and worked in the area of stakeholder engagement and stakeholder management, which would be the main topic of my talk today. And I'll come to the fundamental tenets of it in a minute. So I pursued that kind of research for almost over 9 years now, and it's been going amazing. It's a field that I think would require the whole lifetime to be invested in, and I think it is very much applied to anyone who's starting a business or somebody who has already started a business and want to know what's coming next. How can I really grow my business? What would be my mindset on going and taking on this growth? So that really helps. The stakeholder theory notion helps you with that big time. Other than that, so after I finished my PhD, just like any other Pakistani who's living overseas or whose family is in Pakistan, I actually ventured in coming to Pakistan for some time. I got an offer from LUMS, but then I got an offer again from an institution in Canada, and I came back and started teaching that in a business school. So I also worked in a business school in Canada. It's called Wilfrid Laurier University. The business school was called Lazarita School of Business and Economics. So I taught operations management, operation design, or decision science, or decision thinking in these in that organization. And then I moved back to my alma mater, which is University of Waterloo. So I've been here since 2017, and it's been going well. Now, I'll just give you a brief introduction about the place where I work, that is University of Waterloo. So I'm stationed in the Faculty of Engineering. I'm in the Management Science Department, though, so University of Waterloo does not have a business school. We have an engineering school, which is well renowned. I think it falls as World 21 or 22. It's really highly ranked. I teach to students who go on and work for companies like Tesla, Apple, Microsoft, Google. In the city where I live, we have offices of companies like Google, Communitech Hub, D2, D2L, excuse me, Desire to Learn. That is a really big tech organization for learning management softwares. So we house a lot of technologically innovative organizations in this city. So the Waterloo region is extremely, I would say, unique in a way that it's just 1 hour, less than an hour away from the main city, which is Toronto. So if you want to drive there, you can just drive there in an hour. But this city houses more than 1,000 technology startups. And there are many multinational companies as well around our campus. So the kind of effect it has on our teaching and on our university is that we have a lot of interaction, a lot of collaboration happening with the industry. So whatever we teach has a real applied significance. So this region actually is known as the Silicon Valley of the North. So they are trying to make or mimic the Silicon Valley model in Waterloo region, and it's like the northern side of it because it's a Canadian side. So it is a hub for global innovation. It is like a technology cluster in North America, just similar to Silicon Valley. Are the reason why a lot of these organizations, multinationals or these startups want to start here because there's abundance of talent. The students that we teach, they are well aware in these skills. They are well versed in them. They're up to date. They're really highly technologically advanced in terms of they have to take CS related courses, programming courses. So they're quite good with that. So having said a little bit about that, I also want to stress on a few labs or few centers that we run in parallel at the university. So as a way of responsibility and giving back to the society, the university also pushes to develop some accelerator centers, and we have like free spaces available for our own students and also from people who are living in the region to come and commercialize any of their inventions with us. And the university kind of guides them, helps them in filing for patents, filing for any IP records, which is very expensive here. So, but we guide them, we give them the autonomy. And the best part of University of Waterloo is that whatever you invent, whatever you work on, becomes your IP. So the university does not take any cut in that, which is quite unique here in North America because a lot of other universities like University of Toronto, McMaster University, which are really good universities here, they take a share in your venture or they would charge you a fee, but University of Waterloo does not do that. So we have, like I mentioned, we don't have a business school here, but we have a close approximate of it, which is called Conrad Business Entrepreneurship and Technology Center. They recently renamed it. They've started calling themselves as a school, but what they teach there is giving entrepreneurs the skills, technology skills, giving them the exposure, or some things that they need to run their businesses as a startup. So it's a 1 year degree program, and they induct people who are already mature, who have done some sort of business, or they have some experience. So they come and join. And I've seen a lot of Pakistanis actually coming to that program and pursuing their degrees. Later on, they can start their own businesses or they can just go on and start working in some tech organizations. We also have a lab called, which is quite famous for its solutions. So it's called Problem Lab. The mandate of the Problem Lab is, and the focus of some of the professors here, and the way we guide our students is that you don't have to go and work on everything that's out there. You don't have to go and just come up with an idea and start working on it. That's not very smart. And we all know, since you're students of entrepreneurship, you would also resonate this with me and would think the same way, that a lot of startups fail. Not many startups actually make to the mature or even to growth stage. So why is that? That a lot of organizations don't even go to that or those stages, and they just go to the decline stage right after their startup stage. So this kind of problem lab actually guides them and shows them the areas where lucrative areas where they can go and start adding value to the system. And they say, this year, and they run actually a lot of analyses on that. They would go and say, look at this multimedia entertainment industry. It's a multi-billion dollar industry right now. Not many people are in that. So why don't you come up with an idea and start something that goes and help you with that or help the world with that? So it's a multi-billion dollar industry, and that's a real great motivation for a lot of people here. And secondly, they could also even point you towards some real problem solving, like the problem of fake news, the problem of wrong messages going on the internet. So they would say, okay, so let's start a business. Why don't you come up with a solution? And we're ready to invest about $25,000 in you. And this could be a grant, but you would have to show us your deliverables over time. So it kind of gives you the push and gives you the seed money to start your business, and also to come up with a technology that really resolves a real world problem. So that's the kind of push that we feel here at the University of Waterloo and in the Waterloo region. And there's actually a joke about this, that everybody here actually starts a business one way or the other. So I also try and venture out, even though I work full time as an instructor, as a faculty member, as a researcher. But we also have our own side things where we're testing new technologies, trying to commercialize them, because the culture is such. Why I spend so much time on this? I think that is exactly what I'm seeing being replicated at your institution, at the IBA, or the institutions in. I've known Hans for a long time now. So in Bangkok and in Asia or Far East Asia, I've seen that a lot of startups are actually moving, or a lot of universities are adapting this model because this works. So all we need is we need to develop a cluster, a culture where we have these kind of push applied to us so that we can start our business. We could really distill our ideas, and the ones that are really good ideas can actually move on and go enter into the mature or even growth stage of organizations. So this is the background of where I work. It's a very technologically advanced area. And one more side I haven't talked to you about this Waterloo region is that we house the biggest community of Mennonite Christians in this area. And I don't know if you know about Mennonite Christians. They are religious people. They've been living here for a very long time, but they originally migrated from Germany in 19 after the Second World War. So they're extremely conservative. And I would tell you one thing, that when I go out for shopping to Walmart, to all these grocery stores, you'll be surprised to know that they have their own parking spaces for their buggies. So they still ride their horses and they still come in buggies. They don't use cars, they don't use electricity, they don't use any technologies in those regions. Or in their own, they're farmers mostly. They have their own businesses, and very traditional people. They don't use credit cards. They don't believe in that kind of structured economy, and they have their own way of doing business. And like I said, they're super religious people, super religious Christians here. The reason why I want to talk about this is because there's this blend, and they are really strong in the community. And then there's this highly technologically advanced people who are working at Google, who are driving University of Waterloo, who are extremely and sometimes not religious at all. And both of them, both these extremes are living in harmony in this region like anything, and everybody respects that, everybody likes that. And in fact, they add a lot of value to our region in terms of they instill empathy, they instill good manners in their children, and they actually go on and grow on becoming the leaders of their businesses or their farmhouses. So they own a lot of land, and they have different kind of businesses out here. So it actually adds a lot of character, a lot of value to our region, which I think is also adding to the ecosystem, the entrepreneurial ecosystem of this region. All right. Now I'm going to start on by giving you a bit of background on stakeholder theory. That is the main purpose of my talk. So why stakeholder theory, and what is that stakeholder theory? Is there anybody who can shed some light on it? What is your understanding of stakeholder theory? What do you think it is? Maybe just write a few words in the chat box here. So what do you think about a stakeholder?
I think a stakeholder, this is Kamar Arshad. I think a stakeholder are people who have invested in a certain business, and their entire money is invested there, and they are concerned with the outcome of that investment. They are the stakeholders.
Okay, that's. Thank you for sharing this. I'll come to that. That's one part of being a stakeholder. That's not the whole idea of a stakeholder. So I'm looking at some of the comments here. Yes, it is an external and internal, so that are affected by a business. All right, that's good. Means you own business directly or indirectly. Anyone who can influence positively or negative, that's really good. Anyone having direct or indirect in the project or business is limited terms as shareholder, but stakeholders include all connected to business in any ways. More or less, they're all correct. In fact, some of them are very, very precisely defined. Okay, so what is a stakeholder? A stakeholder, according to Ed Freeman, who actually coined this theory back in 1980s, to be precise, in 1984. So anybody who can affect or be affected by the decisions that you make in the organization, that's your stakeholder. Typically, these are your employees, these are your suppliers, these are your customers, these are your financiers. So what Arshad Saab, you were mentioning, these are your communities that also include your environment, government, NGOs, anybody who can influence you or who you can influence as an organization becomes your stakeholder. So just to give you a little bit more background on the stakeholder engagement or stakeholder theory, it stemmed from the notion that there are unequal opportunities for wealth creation in the world. And we all know that. I'm from a developing country. I've lived all my life or most of my life in Pakistan. So it's a developing country with its challenges, financial challenges and all that. So people living there, they have different kind of ecosystem than people that I've seen living in developed countries like the US or Canada or even in Europe. So we all know that there are unequal opportunities for this kind of wealth creation. So what has been the role of academic research or business innovation in this area? In terms of business innovation, we believe that businesses have really helped in bringing better innovation in the world, in fostering better drive for giving everybody the chance to, or some opportunity to perform better. Now think about it. 30 years ago, it was super difficult for any startup to go and compete with any established organization. Now it's not. Now you can start a business in any part of the world because of this technology or technological innovation, all these platforms. You can directly compete with any organization fairly. So that's what has happened in last few decades, and because of this innovation in academic research and also in businesses. Now, there's this notion of business stakeholder engagement, which has been promoted heavily in the recent years. And I'll just come to that by giving you or showing you some contrasting models to this business stakeholder engagement model, which is stakeholder theory. Now, back in the days, I would say even at the beginning of this 20th century, or when even before that, when Adam Smith wrote the book. So in 1800s, some philosophers who documented this idea of capitalism. Um, so initially, when I started my research, I thought that businesses are bad. So capitalism is really the weakest link in the whole thing. That is why people living in Pakistan or developing country citizens, they're always at a disadvantage. So I started doing some research and finding some ways to curb that. And I came across some models that already exist in capitalism. I'm sure you are aware of those terms, things like corporate social responsibility. A lot of companies do that. You go to any big organization's website, they would have a page dedicated for what they're doing for the society there. And then I started doing some more research on people who actually did research and wrote about capitalism in 18th century, 19th century, and even 20th century. And I was dumbfounded by this notion that a lot of people who wrote about capitalism were actually trying to create value for everyone around. They were not greedy. So somehow this message went wrong in businesses. And that's the reason why a lot of organizations were compelled to have some sort of social innovation or social kind of drive associated with their businesses so that they could be legitimized in the eyes of their consumers. So that's why the corporate social responsibility area kind of propped up post Second World War, and a lot of companies started because they had a lot of wealth by doing better business. So in 1990s and even in 2000s, early 2000, I would say, a lot of people starting critiquing this idea of corporate social responsibility. And you could see some research propping up suggesting that this is just greenwashing, or just saying good things but not actually doing much good for the society by having these kind of ideas of corporate social responsibility. So it's not doing enough. And they were not wrong about it. Think about what happened in 2008 when the economic meltdown happened. You all know that there was a big recession. We are experiencing one right now, but the reasons are different. In 2008, the reason was entirely the greed of some capitalistic organizations. And like Merrill Lynch, the Bank of America was not too much associated with that, but Merrill Lynch and what was the other bank? Lehman Brothers. So they actually went down, and because of that, the whole economy fell down like anything. And there was a dent of about 25 to 28% in the world economy. So people started claiming this idea that corporate social responsibility is not doing enough for the society. Reason: look at what Merrill Lynch or Lehman Brothers had as their corporate social responsibility plans. They were ISO certified in doing societal benefit, bringing societal benefit. And here we are. Because of them, the whole world is experiencing a recession. So were they really responsible? No. So there were a lot of critique then. And in 2011, Michael Porter and Mark Kramer, they wrote a very influential seminal article on creating shared value. And they started suggesting that for any organization, you should start canvassing all the social problems around you and start directing your business towards solving those social problems. When you start doing that, the profits will follow. You don't have to then go out of the way and have another corporate social responsibility venture in your companies. Let me give you a brief example and then we'll move on from here. For example, and I'm just making this up, Nestle. So Nestle is in the business, in the food business largely, and it's a FMCG, fast moving consumer good organization that produces almost everything that we eat. Uh, and if they're in that business and they start up a school, I mean, they're doing a good job, and they start up a school, let's say in a very um, I would say underprivileged society in Pakistan, for example. Let's say they go and open a school in places like Thar, or in remote places in Sindh, or remote places in Punjab. That's a great thing. But are they really serving their business purpose there? No, they're not. They're not in the business of opening up schools. So what happens is there's a turmoil. 2008 happens, or 2019 or 2020 happens. Recession comes. Now there's the cash is scarce. They will pull out all their money from those ventures. And people living in places like Thar or remote places in Punjab, they're going to be left hanging, right? So that's not a sustainable model. So Michael Porter then suggested that for you as an organization to do well, think about these areas where there is an opportunity to do good, to do better for the society. If you're in the food business, come up with your food products that are very much I would say purchasable in those regions. So the buying power is should be there, and enhance the nutritional value in your products, and then start selling or maybe donating those to the regions where you believe people are in distraught, or there are unequal opportunities for people to actually go and have a better lifestyle. So if you start aligning your interest with the interest of the society, chances are you're going to do better, you're going to become more sustainable, and in the longer run, you don't need corporate social responsibility. So this was a mind shift. I hope that you're following me throughout this. So it was a mind shift that traditionally capitalism and all these entrepreneurial ventures, they have been focused on just creating value for their shareholders, just the people with the money who have lent you the money or given you the money, or people who have invested in you, and you just take care of their interest. And now they're slightly shifting you towards taking care of the people in the society or communities, and aligning your interest with those, so that you don't have to then go out of the way and help your other stakeholders. So this was creating shared value. And I kid you not, when I first read it in 2011, I was finishing my master's degree, And I thought, okay, I found my conceptual place or conceptual model for my PhD. And little did I know that I was missing on a real big piece by Ed Freeman that he wrote in 1984, and that was more academic in a way, that talks about almost all stakeholders. So this Michael Porter model of creating shared value was talking still about the society and business. That's good, but it's still not doing enough. There are other people too. There are other stakeholders too. So what do I now mean by stakeholders? So stakeholder is defined as any group or individual who can affect or is affected by or of an organization's achievement. And this definition was coined in 1984. So this was antithetical to the shareholder theory. So the shareholder theory was, which we still teach in our business schools. So if you have done an MBA or if you have taken that degree, you probably have gone through the shareholder theory in your academia. And that suggests that the fiduciary duty of any organization is to create value for their shareholders only the people with the money. And that's what we are actually doing mostly in today's world. And that's why capitalism attracts such a bad name. In reality, capitalism is a very good driver of bringing innovation in the system. And as out of interest, I also started looking when I was doing my research in this area. I was just interested to see what our Islamic model is about this whole thing. And I found the stakeholder engagement model the closest to the Islamic model. And that was to take care of all the stakeholders that are around you equally without creating trade offs, without giving employees more focus and customers less focus, or shareholders more focus and your employees less focus. We're not going to do that. We're going to think of all these stakeholders without trade offs. Be creative about that. So there would be some competing interest in these stakeholders. Nobody's denying that. Now let's come to some examples that we see nowadays. I think I'm running out of time. I just have 17 minutes. So Taskin, I would try and finish this off in the next 7 minutes so that I can take some questions then. Is that how it works?
That would be great.
All right, perfect. So I'm going to now bring some examples to this discussion. Fast forward, COVID happened, and we are all living through that. It's a terrible, terrible situation to live in for many businesses, for many lives all around the world. What happened? Look around. What kind of businesses sustained, and what kind of businesses thrived actually because of this COVID, versus what kind of businesses were wiped out, or they actually required bailout packages from the government big time. I can give you some examples from North America. So major airline industry, so major airlines in this region, they're just looking for government stimulus packages, billions of dollars a month to be given to them. And the reason why they do that is because they were extremely, extremely irresponsible when they had the money or when they were actually making profits. So a lot of companies when they were doing well, like Delta Airlines, American Airlines, what they were doing when they were going in profits in last 4 or 5 years, and they were going in hefty profits. They were buying back their own stock. So they would go online or perhaps go to their brokerage houses and buy back their own stocks in bulk. What is it doing? It's increasing the wealth, like the stock wealth, eventually for the company. Their stock prices are going up because the demand is high, the supply is less, driving the price of their stocks higher. So the executives of that company and the shareholders, they were the beneficiaries. That's it. Not the employees, not the customers, not the environment, not the communities, nobody else. Only the shareholders were the beneficiaries of that. And then came 2019 and 2020 because of COVID, travel restrictions, that industry is like badly affected. What did they do? They had no cash left. Their stock prices, which they actually manipulated by buying back their own stock to reach a really high level, plummeted like anything. 100% kind of plummeting or 50% down in last year as compared to the last year stock prices. So it was a huge blow to that industry. So that really tells us one thing: companies who are driven for still just one stakeholder or just a few stakeholders, that's not a very smart thing for you to do as a business owner, as an entrepreneur. The smarter thing would be to do something what IBA is perhaps doing, what my organization did. We still have jobs. Everybody is going through some turmoil, but I'm very happy, and alhamdulillah, I feel lucky in a way that our organizations invested in the right technologies at the right time. So our organization was already teaching online beforehand. And Dr. Shahid Qureshi and maybe Taskeen also knows about this, that I've been teaching online for last 8 years at the University of Waterloo. I was associated with the master's level executive education program where I was giving education to people who are executives in companies in Canada and in the US. And I've been doing that for last 8 years. So this was nothing new for us. We just exactly quickly adapted and we started offering our courses online. And that was the reason why we never opened up. So our university, only a few programs had to open up, programs where you really want people to, or your students to come to labs, and they're doing it very responsibly. And just to tell you that our organization also built a hospital within our campus, and they're doing rapid testing of COVID for the staff, for the faculty, for the students on spot. So if I have any symptom, I could just go 2 kilometers, drive there. They would take care of me, and I know that this kind of facility exists. Now, this kind of facility comes at a price. It's not free, but it takes time to build this kind of, and it was a mindset. So this was more of a stakeholder mindset that these organizations like IBA or Waterloo, they started doing or taking on in the earlier years. Look at the the restaurant businesses that thrived. And I can tell you the businesses who already had online presence, who were already working with companies like Uber Eats, or they had good online platforms and good pricing, and they were giving good quality to the customers through their deliveries. They actually had a really good time during the COVID-19 situation or pandemic. So they invested in various different stakeholders, and they had a really good understanding in the community. And when things started becoming bad in this region, I remember back in March when we had our first lockdown, I have a couple of friends who started Pakistani restaurants in this area. I called them up, and they're doing very well, by the way. Their businesses are growing like anything. I called him up, and his name is Zahid, and he said, buddy, you all have to come out and support us. I mean, we're otherwise we won't be able to sustain. And little did I know that in next few months, they would be the market leaders because they never stopped, but they adapted to the requirements of the city, requirements of the the country. So the overall lockdown environment was imposed, and they had to adapt quickly, and they adapted quickly, and they actually became the leaders in that, and the community started supporting them. People knew that they're serving safer food. There are no bad stories associated with their business, so it's a good thing. So it's been almost like 8 months. So initially, if they were operating from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m., I kid you not, they're now operating from 9 a.m. to 4 a.m. at night. And that's a very rare thing in our cities, because not many places remain open after 10 p.m. So in Canada, in the US, the culture is that not many people go out and shopping and going to restaurants much later at night, like we do in Pakistan. So it's a different culture. But just imagine, because of this, they actually started feeling more demand. So the point here is, the takeaway here is that when you start taking care of your stakeholders, your multiple stakeholders, the chances, it's a mindset that you're going to do a good job, and you would become sustainable in the longer term for your organization. And I see this example of Zoom. I wish I had purchased some Zoom stock. I actually missed my boat there. I kid you not. I kid you not. I have a friend who works in Amazon in the US. I'm not going to tell you his name or anything, but he made a fortune just overnight. So what he did, he actually purchased a lot of stocks just before their earnings were due, and when their earnings came, I think there was a bump of $100 per stock. So if he had just, and he invested heavily in that, and I know the amount that he made. I wish I was smart enough to do that, but I missed that boat. And there are a lot of other organizations too who are in the same boat. Now, the message, the takeaway message is I've done research on startup firms in this region. They significantly lack stakeholder engagement thought process, significantly. I think it's the same in Pakistan too. It's not just in North America. People in a mature stage organization area, they become somewhat aware of the opportunities, and they think, okay, so in order to venture into a newer pasture, in order to grow and start another S curve, they probably have to go and start connecting their business with the society somehow. And that's very much closer to what Michael Porter suggested as creating shared value. I kid you not, when I started doing research, I saw actually companies like Samsung, Nestle, removing their corporate social responsibility names from their websites and their initiatives and started calling them creating shared value. And I was super impressed that, okay, Michael Porter, they're listening to Michael Porter. And Michael Porter, if you know, is a professor in Harvard, a very well renowned professor. But let me tell you one thing, that's after studying this subject for almost like a decade, I realized that Ed Freeman, who's also a professor in Darden Business School, his work is, it goes even one step higher. So the stakeholder engagement is even one step higher than Michael Porter's idea of creating shared value. Well, it's a great idea. Corporate social responsibility is a good idea. It doesn't do enough. Creating shared value is a good idea. Doesn't do enough. Creating value for all stakeholders is an amazing idea. It works for everyone. I've given you example of the airline industry. I've given you example of, but I don't think I've given you, but I'll give you that. Pharmaceutical companies. Novartis, it's a Danish company. No, I think it's a Nordic, one of, yeah, Nordic company. So it's creating value for a lot of people in the world. Actually, their mandate is um, not to charge expensive prices to their customers, and they're eradicating really important issues in the world through their research and through their products. So a lot of companies that are driven for their stakeholders, they actually do a good job. IKEA is another example. Whole Foods is another example. Now, if I say Amazon, that also solves a lot of problems. If I say Google, that also solves a lot of problems. But there's some bad stories associated with them too. I mean, when the organization becomes really big, there's always a criticism. Are they there yet? No. But are they moving towards it? Yes. So, as an entrepreneur, my message to you would be start thinking about outlining your own stakeholders. Who are your stakeholders? Another thing to define what stakeholders could be, if you are a law enforcing agency, terrorists or people who are doing all sorts of bad things also become your stakeholders because you have to think one step ahead of them in order to curb that, right? So stakeholder is very broad definition of almost anything and everything that can affect you or can be affected by your decisions. So first outline all your stakeholders, think about them and start thinking, how can I create value for them and without trade-offs? So how can I keep my employees motivated? How can I do give a better environment for my employees? Because they're the ones who are going to serve to my customers. And that's eventually going to add more value to my customers. And when that adds value to the customers are going to say good things about me. So I don't need to go on and say to the world that I'm the best, I'm running a good corporate social responsibility program. No, it won't be needed. People would just go and sign up for your service because you're that good. So, well, during this process, obviously you could be blindsided. That's where the stakeholder engagement model is going to come and help you save your business. And if you have that, you would say, okay, I made a mistake. Let me do the right thing. And I'm going to rectify it for you. And then this is stakeholder engagement thinking that's going to help you in making your organization more sustaining. All right. So with that, I would open the floor for any questions. I think it would be better if we could have an interaction now. So Taskeen, over to you.
If participants, that was a wonderful and a very insightful session. Thank you so much, Dr. Umair, especially the personal experiences. They're always a very good touch. If participants have any question, please raise your hands or type them down in the chat box so that we can have them.
Or Taskin, I think there are less participants today, so maybe they can open their mic and they can just
Do
ask
that as
questions. That's
participants have that. You can also unmute yourselves and ask the questions or any comment on the session.
Hi, I have a question.
sure for
Ji,
Go ahead.
Farhan,
What I wanted to know is what are the tools necessary to have for the identification of the stakeholders for a startup or an ongoing business.
Uh, Frankly, I would say you don't need a tool. It is something that you could just draw it out on a piece of paper to begin with. There are many tools. I mean, you can start with value creation canvas and all those tools that are already out there. There's another tool which is called Stakeholder Mapping. You can find that on the web. But to be honest, what I would suggest is you just take a piece of paper, you just take a sticky note, write your organization in the middle, and start making a circle around it with all the stakeholders. And how you define your stakeholder is according to the definition that I told you. Anybody who you can affect or be affected by your decisions is your stakeholder. It could also be your family, by the way. I've done some interviews of some research of some practitioners, startup firm people, and they say that our families are our stakeholders because they're suffering like anything with our decisions, and that's very true. So it goes beyond just the people with the money, employees, customers. So anybody or anything that you can affect or can be affected by you is your stakeholder. And I mean, just draw it out and then start thinking about creating value for them. All right, there's a question. If labor are not good, then what to do? How to control them? I would say you don't have to necessarily control them. I really don't understand the context in which you're mentioning this, but I'm just assuming that with that, what you mean is that people could add value to your company and your employees perhaps are not adding value at this time. What to do with them? Is that correct? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, yeah. This
All
is the
right.
question. Yeah,
So in that case, you have to really understand why are they not feeling motivated? What's wrong there?
I know.
So once you know the answer to that, address that question, and I mean you'll be fine. The same employees would start working hard. The same employees would actually become more loyal to you and would start creating more value for you. So
Yeah.
that, according to the stakeholder theory, I mean, there's no one set solution for everything. What I want to just say is that most of the times, problems lie in your supply chain, problems lie in behavior, problems lie in how you run your organization. So if you have the stakeholder management hat on, you would then go and rectify those problems. You become a problem solver for your customers, for your suppliers, for your communities, for your financiers. And that's your role as a manager. That's your role as an entrepreneur. And the rest would then automatically take care of itself. And if you still believe that the person or the staff is not adding much value even after rectifying that, then it's time to change the staff. Then you can't really have too many options there. All right. Mazahir asked a question. More stakeholders is a good
Thank
thing.
you. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for the question. More stakeholders in business is good or bad because more stakeholders means more dependency. Mazahir, excellent question. Um, this is something that I was really wrong about when I started researching on stakeholder theory. I always thought that having more stakeholders is a good idea. It's the best idea. But little did I know that the guy who came up with stakeholder theory thought otherwise. So I had a privilege to go to Darden Business School last year before this whole thing was there. And I remember actually flying directly from Darden to IBA last year in 2019 to deliver some talks. And I spent about a week with the people who work in stakeholder theory, with himself, Ed Freeman. And I asked this question. And his answer was, Umair, it's not about how many stakeholders, it's about whatever stakeholders you have, doing a good job with them. And he knew that I was also I'm a student of music, and he was a musician. So Ed Freeman is a professional recording artist, and he's a musician. He's a producer as well. So I was at his house. He had a really huge music studio, and he said, he gave me this analogy from music part. He said, um, if you know about blues, when you're playing guitar or when you're playing piano, and if you're playing blues, it's never about how many notes you play. It's never about that. It's about what notes you play and do a good job with those notes. So that's exactly how stakeholders should be catered for. If you have few stakeholders, and that's honestly been my research, when you're a startup, you don't have many stakeholders. When you become a growth stage organization, then you have many stakeholders. When you become a mature stage organization, oh, then you have to deal with many, many stakeholders. So with growth, more stakeholders have to be dealt with. And it's an art. It's a science too. I mean, you have to bring in this reciprocity in your model where you're doing something for those stakeholders and they're doing that for you as well. And that's how value is being created. And initially, I think I made a comment about this being very close to the Islamic model of doing business. It is very close to that. I remember growing up listening to the saying of the Prophet that you have to, Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, which suggests that you have to uh, pay your employee in time or your supplier in time before even the sweat is, I think there was a saying, right? Is dried out. So give the money to the people you owe on time. And look what's happening in Pakistan. I worked in Pakistan for some time. My brother works there. I know what the culture is. Look at how we treat our suppliers there. Nobody gets their payments on time. So the suppliers are always in credit.
Yeah,
So they
no,
have the
right.
time.
This is,
Sorry, Yasmin, you
this
want to
is
say
the
something?
problem here. The
Yeah,
people
yeah,
don't pay
exactly.
on time, and it's very
Exactly.
difficult for us to pay the labor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And look what kind of problem it's actually adding to the system. So that's you're being moving away from the stakeholder engagement model, which is very close to being an Islamic model. And that is very close to being Islamic capitalism, which is taking care of everyone, not just one, not just two stakeholders. It's taking care of everyone around you. And if you really notice how I started my talk, I mentioned about the Mennonite community here. I mentioned about that we all are doing something for each other. Everybody's doing something for the community. Nobody's greedy here. And I kid you not, people living in Waterloo, they're wealthy people. They have a lot of money. But I kid you not, I don't see them driving flashy cars out there. They're actually living a very humble and simple life. They just maybe have a few investments here and there, but they invest back in the university. They invest back in the community. I came from Pakistan. Um, the amount of money that I had to pay for my master's and PhD, I could have never afforded that if I had to do it from my own pocket, because it was three times the money that any national would pay. And I was an international student. So I was funded by Research in Motion, RIM, BlackBerry. Why? Why would they invest in somebody who's not coming from their country? So they have a really good model. They invest in the right people, they invest in the right technologies, they have a heart, they try and do a better job for all stakeholders. Are they perfect? No. Are they good? Yes. Are they trying to be better? Yes. So that's what I'm really asking you to focus on. And that's actually the mantra. I would say that's the holy grail, or however you want to call it. That's um, the magic card in your recipe, or the magic ingredient in your recipe, that you put the stakeholder engagement hat on from today onwards. And I kid you not, you would be better than your competitors. And even in stakeholder theory, there's a notion which suggests um, improving or encouraging the collaborative strategic posture rather than competition. And look how beautiful that concept is. That is again very close to being an Islamic organization. So we have heard about these stories when one shop keeper who did some good business in that day would reroute the customer to the competitor and say, well, this person did not have good sales, go and purchase it from them. So that's again creating collaborative strategic posture rather than doing competition all the time. And that's what a lot of tech organizations are doing. Look at what Microsoft is doing. Their products are being used in cross platform. They're taking buying technologies, renting technologies. That's what's happening with BlackBerry. That's what's happening with Apple, with all these products. They're collaborating with each other. So that's a good thing to actually increase the value in your organization. Sorry, I missed a question here. Can you recommend some method to actually analyze your stakeholder specialty, especially when numbers in hundreds? Um, I would doubt, Farhan, that you would ever go in hundreds for stakeholders. I or that would be just too many stakeholders to deal with. Like I said, there you could just Google stakeholder mapping tool, and you would find a few tools there. I used to have a book. I don't know if it's in my office or here. Just bear with me. Let me try and grab something. Uh, there was a there was a book on venture development, but I don't see that here. I'm sorry, I just cannot find that book up here. Maybe it's up right up there. But it actually you can use any canvas, value creation canvas for that. So it allows you to write down all the stakeholders that you can really use. But I would say don't go in hundreds. You don't have to go in hundreds. And the reason why I want to show you something is something like this. So this is from Ed Freeman's book. So you see a firm comes in the middle, and then the stakeholders are just around it. These could be internal, these could be external. Um, and Another thing that I just want to quickly show you is this is a very famous graph that you would find on the internet as well. So take a note of that, or maybe take a screenshot of this. So this is from Ed Freeman's book. And what happens is that you're a firm that's in the middle, and then you have local communities, owners, consumer advocates, customers, competitors, media, employees, environmentalists, suppliers, government, and so on and so forth. So you can have a really big list of it. And this is the book's name, Strategic Management. And this was, I think it's out of print now. You can find another version of this. This was written in 1984. And when I went to Darden last year, Ed actually signed it for me. So I have his signature as well. I'm a big admirer of his work, really good work. But another book that you can really read and you can maybe find in Pakistan is this one, Stakeholder Theory. It's a really good read for any manager. There's another one which is a very recent version in 2018. They actually republished the Stakeholder Theory book. It's edited by Jeffrey Harrison, Barney, and Freeman, and Robert Phillips. And it's called The Cambridge Handbook of Stakeholder Theory. It's a much more recent book. And if you're interested in reciprocity and trying to understand building trust, then this book of Stakeholder Theory and Organizational Ethics is a must read by Robert Phillips. He's a professor in Schulich School in York University in Canada. And they have been doing this research for a very, very long time. And these are great books to read, to be honest. So I would highly recommend, encourage you, if you find time, please read through these books and you would be happy. I can tell you that. All right. Oh, there's a follow-on comment. I'm in hundreds already. What I'm doing is creating group for stakeholders and then applying some criteria. How come they're in hundreds, Farhan? Are you counting each of maybe the customers as your stakeholders separately? Um, Would you like to elaborate on? Because I'm interested. How come they could be in hundreds? Who are these stakeholders then?
Well, I would like to, but right now I cannot because it is confidential.
Okay,
What I can do, I can send you a message privately, and
sure.
you will understand what is the problem right now I am in.
Okay, sure. That sounds good. All right. So any other questions? Any other comments? I think I've taken more time than I was given. I hope that's okay, Taskeen.
That is all right. Actually I am very grateful for the overtime that you've given us. We are well over time and
Shah,
you answered a lot of questions as well. So I would just like to take this moment to thank you. To conclude the session, we just have one question from Srijan Pandey. If you could just answer this one because
Oh,
he's repeating
sure.
it.
Okay, I see that question now. Sorry, I missed that. Do you think building an organization structure with teams looking over specific stakeholders comply with the Islamic, sorry, I just missed that, Islamic stakeholder model? Building a, I think any, if I've understood your question correctly, what you're suggesting is that if you're building an organization structure with people who would be then taking care of all the stakeholders around it, is that what it's all about, Islamic stakeholder model? I don't want to call it an Islamic stakeholder model only, because that's going to narrow the definition of it very much. So just call it the stakeholder model. And you don't have to call it any other model than that. And if you develop a team that really takes care of all the stakeholders, the idea is that essentially and eventually that's going to help you big time in solving real problems. So whether you want to call it the Islamic stakeholder model, that's up to you. The connection I was trying to make was that it is the closest of the capitalistic model that is also defined in Islam to an extent, according to my studies. Um, I know there are some scholars who would suggest that socialism was the best idea ever and which is closest to Islam. But there were other scholars as well who suggested that not really, because socialism also brings in um, lack of innovation, and people are not driven to do well, and they're not really motivated. So that really is against the idea. But capitalism, because of so many examples we have in the Islamic practice of doing trading, it's actually being promoted. But that's very close to how the West defines as that stakeholder capitalism or stakeholder management or humanistic management. So as a student of the Islamic side of things and as a student of the Western philosophy, I actually see this kind of connection or syndicate between these two.